and we're back in the garage today because yet again we're going to be taking that engine to pieces. We've got a few more things I want to put in there. Over the past couple of weeks I've noticed that upon startup this car is quite smoky, so first up we've got a set of brand new valve stem seals, one for each valve, so we've got 16 in there. While we're in there, it makes sense to fit a new uprated head gasket. One, they're not reusable, even though there's nothing wrong with mine, I'm going to replace it anyway. And we're also going to be upgrading from head bolts to ARP bolts and studs. These are reusable, they're able to hold a lot more pressure, especially as my car's turboed. I don't want the head lifting while I'm doing a nice big boosty skid, do I? So we're going to put these in there. It also means that if I have to take the car apart again, that it makes life a lot easier. So yeah, let's take this thing to pieces. Okay, so before we can even think about fitting any of those shiny new parts, there's quite a lot that's got to come off first. I'm going to start with the coils, get those off, then we'll take the rocker cover off. Turbo's got to come off as well, along with all this piping here. Yet again, the front dress has got to come off the engine, so all the pulleys, all the belts, they've got to come off, because we've got to remove the timing gear for this job. You've seen all this before, you know what it looks like, so I'm going to crack on with that, and you can join me when I'm ready to start disassembling the head. Right then, so we're at the point where we're ready to extract the camshafts from the engine. Now, it's very important when you take each of these caps off that they go back on exactly where you removed them from and pointing in the same direction. Mazda very handily have numbered and lettered each one. You've got exhaust 5, 4, 3, 2 and 1, and an arrow pointing towards the front of the engine, so don't worry too much. So I've already loosened this one off, but just to show you what I'm talking about, we'll loosen off the inlet side. So you've got the 5 main ones. So what we'll do, we'll start here, just very gently until it starts to move like that, and then go to here, and you want to move out in a sort of spiral pattern, spread the load nice and evenly. The manual does say to loosen them in stages of about 5 or 6, but really, so long as you do it nice and gently, you should be fine. So now I can take out all these bolts, lift out the main cap, and then pull the camshafts out. Okay, so here's our engine, bereft of cams and lifters. You can see down in here we've got the tops of our valve springs with the retainers in there. We'll be removing those later on. So I'm pretty sure this head is now ready to come off. We just need to undo the head bolts. That's you'll need one of those multi-pointed, I think it's 12mm to get those out. I've decided to leave the inlet manifold on the car because it's a ball ache to remove in the car. I've done it several times, I don't want to do it again. Pretty sure I've disconnected absolutely everything. As you can see, I've labelled there front of the engine, back of the engine, inlet side, exhaust side, and as I've taken everything out, I've laid it out as it came out of the engine so that I know that when I come to put it back, it's all in exactly the same place. Right then, let's go and pull the head off, shall we? So when you're removing the bolts that hold the cylinder head to the block, it is extremely important that you loosen them slowly and in a specific order as to avoid warping the head. In the manual here, it's got the tightening order, and what it suggests is working in the reverse of that order, loosening each bolt a quarter turn at a time. My breaker bar on here, and go quarter turn, and then we'll go to go again. And then you go around again and again until they can be taken out by hand. There we go, they're all out. When you pull them out, you want to make sure you want to get the little washer with them as well. Right, that should be it now. That should be ready to come off. Okay, so the next thing I'm going to do is install these head studs. Now, it's vitally important that everything here is clean before you put anything in. Make sure there's no gunk, no build-up on the head surface. I've already scraped down and cleaned up the head surface and put the new head gasket in place. So with these studs, one end's got an Allen bolt slot in the end, the other end hasn't. The end without is the one that goes in the block. They only need to be hand tight, and it's a good job because I don't have the size needed. It's some imperial weenie thing that I don't have. So what I'm going to do, just take a little bit of the assembly lube that they provide, and just to make sure nothing galls up, just smear a little bit onto the threads here. Make sure they go in nice and smoothly, and then drop it in the hole. Make sure it lines up. We're going to go in. Yeah. There we go. And wind it in. We'll only go in so far. There we go. That's as tight as I can get it by hand. That's one. 7 more to do. Easy as that. Right, this next part is where it gets a little tedious. What you've got to do is compress each and every one of these valve springs, remove the 2 little half collet retainers, pull the retainer out, get the spring out, and then you'll be able to remove the valve to get to the valve stem seal. There are a couple of ways of doing this. You can do it in the car. You need a special tool for that. I'm using a valve spring compressor. This is a manual one. You can get spring loaded ones or air powered ones. So what we're going to do, clamp it against the valve, clamp it against the top end here, top of the spring, compress it in till I can remove those collets, and then loosen it off, and then it should all come out in one piece. Open this up nice and carefully, just keeping an eye on, make sure you're not galling anything up or catching anything. So just, there we go, there's one. You see, tiny little thing. You want to be super careful with these, because if you drop them or lose them, chances are you're never going to find them again. And there's the other one. Unwind the compressor. Remove it from the engine, and then what I can do is remove, there we are, valve spring and a retainer. Right, so that will be going in my little tray. So I'll crack on and get the rest of these things out. See you in a jiffy. Well, that was considerably more than a jiffy, but I've now removed all the valve springs and the valves from the exhaust side of the manifold. I'm not going to get away with not removing the inlet manifold, as it's too big to get the valve compressor around. That's what I get for trying to make my own life easier. So what I'm going to do, because otherwise I'm going to be here all day, I'm going to start removing the valve stem seals from the exhaust side and installing the new ones. What you'll really want to remove the old ones is a proper pair of valve stem seal pliers. I haven't got any, and because these are crap anyway, I'm just going to go in here with the needle nose and pull that bit off. Is lie the head down flat, so otherwise I'm worried it's going to wobble over. There we go, there's one. Bit of a spin, break them loose. There we are, so you do that 8 times, you end up with 8 knackered little valve stem seals. Anyway, so what I'm going to do now is make sure these areas are all nice and clean. I've got some spray, just give them a quick swiffer. Clean the very ends. Okay, so they're all cleaned out and ready for the new ones. You'll find when you get the kit, if you got the one like I've got, there's green and black. Black's for the exhaust, green is for the inlet. So I'm just going to separate them all, put those back in their bag. What I've done, I found it's a 10mm deep socket, fits nicely over there without putting any pressure on that little O-ring. I've also got somewhere my extension. So what I'm going to do, somehow this happens to be perfectly the same size as the valve stem, so I'm going to very gently push that down in there and then drop the seal over it and use my extension, my socket. You'll feel a slight click when it's home, and then can pull that out. Just make sure it's all the way on. And I can do it 7 more times. There we go, that's the exhaust side done. What I'm actually going to do now is put all the valves and the springs back in so that I've got less loose things knocking about waiting to be kicked over. Installation is the reverse of the removal, as they say in the automotive industry, and as most of you know, anything that says it's universal fit. So I'm going to pop that back together, see you on the other side. Okay, so here's where we're at. The head's rebuilt with all new valve stem seals. I managed to get everything back in there. The valve stem retainer collets were an absolute pain in the arse to get in, but I managed it. I'm going to call it for today. Tomorrow I've got a slight issue to deal with. It's one of the studs snapped that holds the inlet manifold on, so I'm going to have to drill and re-tap that. Yay! That's all I'm going to do for today. Head studs are in place. Head gaskets, they're ready. I've checked the height of all the studs and they all match. Yes, the two at the front are meant to be higher than the rest. So I'll pick this thing up tomorrow. See you then. Good morning everybody, welcome back. It's a new dawn, it's a new day, but it's the same old shed life for me. Done a few things already. I've drilled and re-tapped the broken stud in the head and got the inlet manifold bolted back on, so that's pretty much ready to go. I've given the head a bit of a clean and a wipe down as well. Done the same in the engine bay, cleaned up a few bits and pieces that I'm not able to get to with the head in place, so it's pretty much ready to go back on now, so let's put it on. It's a long way. Well, there it is. Back where it belongs. Found out it's impossible to fit the head with studs with the cam angle sensor in place, so I had to remove that. After that and some fairly inelegant dancing around in the engine bay, managed to get the thing down into place. The main thing you want to be careful of with studs is not to mar the underside of the head by dropping it on it or moving them around. So moving on, what I'm going to do now, fit the washers that come with the stud kit. Hopefully these will all go on without having to lift the head to make clearance for them. Okay, that's the washers in place. Next up, the actual new head bolts. Okay, so after you've installed the nuts, you need to start torquing them down. I'm going to do this in 3 equal stages, starting with the lowest my torque wrench will do, which unfortunately is 42 Newton meters. And again, we want to tighten these in the specific sequence, so starting with number 1, which will be this one. Click and 10. So next we're going to go up to 74. And finally, we're going to 88 Newton meters or 65 foot-pounds. So they're now fully torqued down. I'm going to go around them once more just to double check everything, and then we should be good to start reassembling this engine. Okay, so the head's reinstalled. I've put the cams on, started putting a few things back together. I've given the cams and lifters a coat of oil and just spun them over by hand so that when you first crank the engine over they're not running dry. Made sure everything's spinning freely, so I'm going to crack on and put this thing back together.